How many of you are in one of Professor Hammock's classes? Right now? Okay. All right, good, excellent. A lot of people who are in some of Professor Hammock's classes. We came in together at Rhodes. I've been there now, gosh, this is my 6th year at Rhodes, and Mike was there with me for 3 years, and then we had to lose him. So your loss, no, excuse me, not your loss. Our loss is very much your gain. So very, very glad that you guys are able to enjoy Mike's excellent teaching, his passion for economics, and just his willingness to do things like this. Forgive me, the microphone scares me. All right, so this evening I've been asked to talk about my research on Walmart and my research on big box retail and other people's research on Walmart and on big box retail, some of the effects of Walmart and big box retailers on the economy, on American society, and on a lot of other things that we just generally think are important. So what we're going to talk about is the macroeconomic effects of Walmart, very generally. We'll talk about how Walmart affects prices, how Walmart affects employment, and how Walmart affects aggregate income. We're also going to talk about the so-called non-economic effects of Walmart, so other things that matter besides just jobs, prices, income, and cheap goods. We're going to talk about social capital, we'll talk about individual values, and we'll talk about how people allocate their leisure time. Left mouse button. All right, very good. Excellent. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about macro Walmart. Specifically, let's talk about jobs, let's talk about prices, and let's talk about the effect of Walmart. Let's talk about the effect of Walmart and big box retail on aggregate income. So a lot of people criticize Walmart, saying, well, Walmart comes in and they take all the jobs. They destroy all the small businesses, they take all the jobs, and so after Walmart comes in, the only opportunities people are going to have will be working at Walmart for really, really, really low wages. Or they'll tell the same story about Target, or the same story about Kmart. Some people, to a lesser extent, might tell the same story about Costco. A couple of generations ago, they were telling that story about Sears, or they were telling it about the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. Up until just a few years ago, though, we didn't really know a whole lot about how Walmart, about how Costco, about how Target, about how Kmart affect the job market. And then an economist named Emmett Basker came along and measured the effect of Walmart on local labor market conditions. She found that when Walmart enters, there's a net increase over the long run of about 50 jobs in retail. This is offset by a reduction of about 20 jobs in wholesale, because Walmart is going to integrate vertically somewhat. They do a lot of distribution work on their own without having to go into the wholesale market. So it's about 30 new jobs on net after Walmart enters. A couple of other scholars a few years later did similar estimates and looked at how Walmart affects retail employment and found that every Walmart worker displaces about 1.4 retail workers in the markets in which they enter. So this isn't to say that there are absolutely fewer retail employees as a result of Walmart entry necessarily. It's just that between 1961 and 2004, we got retail employment growth of about 271%, rather than the 279% that it might have been without Walmart. Now notice, when we're talking about employment here, we're talking not about change in the overall job market, but rather these are specific estimates of the effect of Walmart on retail job markets specifically. Specifically, these are estimates of the effect of Walmart on retail employment. Indeed, the scholars who did this follow-up study, David Newmark and some of his co-authors, said there's probably not going to be any long-run net change in employment, because if you reduce employment in retail, that frees up labor to go do something else. And indeed, that's consistent with some of the findings of scholars Russell Sobel and Andrea Dean, who have looked at how Walmart affects the small business community and have found that there's basically no Walmart effect on the self-employment rate, on the number of small business establishments per, I think, 100,000 residents, no Walmart effect on small business bankruptcies. In general, there doesn't really appear to be a net Walmart effect on small business employment, a net Walmart effect on overall employment, and a net Walmart effect on small businesses. Which should raise a question in your mind probably. How in the world can that be the case? Because Walmart is, first of all, enormous, and Walmart sells all sorts of different things, and we've all heard the stories about companies that go out of business when Walmart comes to town. And specifically, if you're in a business where you're going to be competing directly with Walmart, so if you're selling office supplies, or if you're selling hammers, or if you're selling cosmetics or something like that, you're going to have a very, very difficult time after Walmart comes to town because they're almost certainly going to be able to completely destroy you on price. You might have to compete on service, and even then you might not be able to make it up. However, one thing that Walmart does is it lowers prices and increases the purchasing power of people's dollars, and thereby allows them a whole range of new opportunities that they might not otherwise have. So you hear the story about how Walmart comes in, they open up on the outside of town, and they close down all the downtown stores and all the downtown shops, and mom and pop lose their business, and mom and pop lose their jobs, and mom and pop are worse off on net. What Sobel and Dean argue is that yes, this probably happens, but you also get, at least at the state level, no net change in small business employment and no net change in self-employment and no net change in the number of small businesses divided by the number of residents in the population because people reuse those resources doing something else. So this evening we had dinner at, what was the name of the restaurant again? Maple Street Grill. So we had dinner at Maple Street Grill. We walked around downtown Murfreesboro a little bit. First time I've ever been to Murfreesboro. Maple Street Grill is a great place. You have fantastic food, great service. The rolls at Maple Street Grill are like beignets without the powdered sugar on them. They were very, very good. Okay, what in the world does this have to do with anything, and what does it have to do with Walmart specifically? Well, we are richer as a result of the fact that we have access to Walmart, Costco, Target, Kmart. We have access to this global system of international free trade that makes us richer, that makes our dollars go farther, and that allows people to exploit entrepreneurial opportunities, opening restaurants like restaurants in downtown Murfreesboro, or opening law offices, or opening clothing boutiques, and things like that. And indeed, Sobel and Dean point to Morgantown, West Virginia. Professor Sobel is a professor at West Virginia University. Andrew Dean was one of his graduate students. They said, well, yeah, Walmart comes to town, and these companies that compete with Walmart that are downtown businesses, they close, but they get replaced by ice cream parlors, high-end clothing boutiques, law firms, and things like that. So while it might very well be the case that even locally we get reductions in retail employment, or we might even get closure of businesses, at a more aggregate level, at the state level, and indeed at the national level, these savings allow us to do all sorts of other things that we would not otherwise be able to do if our dollars didn't go as far as they do. The takeaway point is that the net effect of Walmart on the overall labor market is, if anything, maybe slightly positive, probably not that large. A couple of scholars looked at Washington, D.C., and specifically, they wanted to see how big box retailers like Walmart, Home Depot, Target, Lowe's, Costco, etc. affect the small business environment. And they found that there was lower growth and lower employment growth for competitors, but specifically competitors in the same narrow business category and also in the same geographic area. So yeah, Walmart is going to hurt you or harm you if you are competing with them directly. They're going to take business. You might have a very, very difficult time of it. But on net, we as a society are probably going to be better off because our dollars are going to go a lot farther and we're going to have a lot more opportunities that we would not have otherwise had. Okay. Let's talk about prices. Walmart's old motto is everyday low prices or always low prices. Today it's save more, live better. And it's pretty clear that Walmart has an obvious price advantage over their competitors of about 10%. So Walmart prices are lower by about 10% than prices elsewhere. Walmart entry also lowers prices for competing retailers. And this is where things get really, really interesting. Emmett Basker, again, who I mentioned a little bit ago, she and one of her co-authors argued that Walmart entry leads, I can't remember if this was regular Walmarts or Walmart supercenters, but leads to about a 1 to 1.2% reduction in competitors' grocery prices. Okay, so it's got to be Walmart supercenters. About a 1 to 1.2% reduction in prices at competing retailers, but the biggest effects are not for like the giant stores, not for Kroger or Albertsons or Safeway, because they're studying, I think, primarily these a lot of companies on the West Coast, but stores that serve low-income consumers. So you have relatively small price effects for major grocery chains, but big price effects for stores that serve primarily low-income consumers. So the benefit from Walmart entry in terms of lower prices and in terms of expanded opportunity is going to go to people who are primarily toward the bottom of the income distribution. The effect of Walmart is so big that a couple of scholars have argued we're in fact mismeasuring the rate of inflation because we don't account for the effect of Walmart, Costco, Target, Home Depot, stores like that. They say that the supercenter phenomenon, or the big box retail phenomenon, means that we are overstating the consumer price index for food for urban consumers by about 0.32 to 0.42 percentage points. Okay, which that doesn't really sound like a lot, but a difference of almost, let's say a third to half a percentage point over a number of years adds up to very, very, very big changes in standards of living. So that should tell you something about just how important the big box retail phenomenon is. That by not measuring it adequately, we are, according to these guys, mismeasuring the rate of inflation. They argue that what they call the compensating variation from access to Walmart, so in other words, the welfare increase from access to Walmart, Costco, Target, etc., is approximately 25% of what people spend on food. So, having access to Walmart, Costco, Target, supercenters, and warehouse clubs is almost as if you were given an additional 25% of what you spend on food every year in added income. Who benefits from that? Well, who tends to spend the largest proportion of their budget on food? Primarily people toward the bottom of the income distribution. The bottom quintile, the next to bottom quintile. People near the bottom of the income distribution, poor people, tend to spend a disproportionate share of their income on food. So a 25% reduction, or excuse me, a 25% increase, 25% of food expenditure increase in welfare is going to benefit primarily poor people. Jason Furman, an economist, I believe he's at NYU now. He was actually an advisor, I believe, to President Obama, calls Walmart a progressive success story, in large part because their price effects have benefited primarily people, again, toward the bottom of the income distribution. There are some estimates that at the county level, when Walmart enters, the local poverty rate kind of goes up. And I think these are estimates that are perhaps credible. They're definitely worth re-examining. But I think even in light of this, when we consider the national effects and the overall effects, the effect is much less ambiguous. It's been estimated. So Richard Vedder and one of his co-authors published a book a couple of years ago on the effect of Walmart, the effect of Costco, the effect of big box retailers very generally. And they argued that the social saving, it is back of the envelope calculation, and argued that the social saving from big box retail was approximately 5% of gross domestic product. So roughly 5% of US GDP. This is an enormous, enormous, enormous number. 5. Well, compared to what? That then becomes kind of the interesting question. For comparison's sake, that's roughly the same increase in GDP or the same social saving that we got in the 19th century from railroads. So Robert Fogel, an economist who won the Nobel Prize for some of his work on this, estimated that in 1890 we had saved about 5% of GDP as a result of railroads in the United States. Vedder and his co-author argued that the effect on American well-being from Walmart, Costco, Target, Sam's Club, Home Depot, etc., is roughly equal to the increase in well-being that we got, or the social saving that we got from railroads. Now pause for just a second. If you have to do like a research project or something like that, and I tell people this everywhere I give this talk, the Vedder and Cox estimate, this 5% number, is very, very rough, very, very back of the envelope. A fantastic project, if you're interested in going to graduate school or something like that, a fantastic project, I think, would be to actually estimate the social saving from big box retailers like Walmart, Costco, Target, and others. Of course, Walmart has attracted a lot of criticism. Their old motto, always low prices, or everyday low prices, has been mocked by some of their critics. They say, everyday low wages, always low wages. Walmart wages are low. Walmart doesn't pay out much in terms of health care benefits and things like that. And indeed, a handful of scholars have estimated, depending on which version of the paper you look at, about a $4.7 billion reduction in retail wages. $4.7 billion or $4.5 billion, a reduction in retail wages attributable to Walmart for the year 2000. So that sounds like an awful lot. You have $4.5 billion, $4.7 billion, that's an enormous amount of money. However, Jason Furman again points out that if you use an estimate by a firm called Global Insight, and granted this is an estimate that was funded by Walmart, I believe, they estimated that Walmart saves the average household $2,329 per year. In that case, for the year 2000, it would be a $263 billion gain, or $263 billion in savings from access to Walmart, which is enormously greater than $4.5 or $4.7 billion in lost wages. Sorry. Okay. Yes. Okay. So average household savings, according to a study by Global Insight. So I'll back up for just a second. Walmart, several years ago, decided to commission a set of studies of the effect of Walmart on labor markets and households and things like that. The Global Insight figure, and I'm getting this from Jason Furman, was $2,329 per household. Okay. Across the board. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So per capita. So the direct and indirect benefits from Walmart, according to this estimate, will be about $263 billion, which again is way bigger than $4.5 billion or way bigger than $4.7 billion. Again, this raises a serious objection, which is if this was in fact a number that's funded by Walmart, then maybe it's something that it's something of which we should be suspicious. So a couple of years or so, in a paper that was published earlier this year, my co-author Charles Cordemanch and I did a couple of very simple back-of-the-envelope calculations that I'll talk about here in a little bit, in which we estimated that just Super Walmart, so just the direct effect and the indirect effect of Super Walmart, so the Walmart Supercenter, where you can get both groceries and everything else you can get at Walmart, those save the average household about $177 per year. So if we use just that estimate, which is less than 1/10 of the Global Insight estimate, we still come away with an estimate of household savings of this was for the year 2002. We multiply that by the number of households in the 2000 census, and we get about $18.7 billion in savings. So yes, even if we take this at face value and say that retail earnings are lower as a result of Walmart, nominal retail earnings are lower as a result of Walmart, real earnings are probably higher because of their effect on prices. So we save a lot of money as a result of the fact that we have access, again, not just to Walmart, but to Target, Kmart, Costco, etc., all of these different firms. And on net, the data suggests that we're probably a lot better off. Come back to Walmart as a progressive success story, or come back to big box retailers as a progressive success story. Again, Jerry Hausman and Ephraim Leibtag argued that Walmart, Target, Costco, etc. produce an income increase or produce a compensating variation equal to approximately 25% of food expenditures per household. Again, if poor households spend more money on food, this suggests that as a percentage of income, it's poor households that get the biggest benefit from access to things like big box retail. So, in terms of the straightforward, narrow financial and economic considerations that people are interested in when they talk about Walmart, when they talk about Costco, etc., it seems fairly straightforward that Walmart, Costco, Target, Kmart are a net benefit to the American economy. We have much lower prices. Our dollars go further. The net effect on jobs is probably either slightly positive or on net zero, and we're richer as a result of the fact that we have these innovations that have taken place in the last 50, 60, 70 years. Some might respond, though, that, well, there are a lot of non-economic values to consider. And Walmart, a lot of people think, well, Walmart is just ugly, or Target is just ugly. There's these gigantic big boxes where you don't know necessarily who you're buying from, or what they're doing, or where the goods are even coming from. And then furthermore, the people who are going out of business might be the pillars of the community. So let's talk a little bit about how Walmart might affect what's called social capital, how Walmart might affect values, how Walmart might affect how people allocate their leisure time. Specifically, what do we mean when we talk about social capital? This is the glue that holds societies together. It's also the grease that makes transactions possible. When you're in a fraternity, when you're in a student organization, you're participating, you're accumulating social capital, you're building relationships by coming to Middle Tennessee State. Anybody else who has gone to Middle Tennessee State, you have that in common now. That's part of a social capital network. Robert Putnam, a leading scholar in the study of social capital, said that whereas physical capital refers to physical objects and human capital refers to properties of individuals, social capital refers to connections among individuals, social networks, and the norms of reciprocity that arise from them. Okay. Now, just a quick show of hands. How many of you have heard your parents or your grandparents complain about kids these years? You're disconnected, and you're spending all of your time sitting there with your little blinky devices, or you're playing video games. You don't know how to have a real relationship. Okay? Allegedly, modern capitalism, as manifested, say, for example, in Walmart or something like that, is at least partially to blame for this. And indeed, there was a paper that came out several years ago suggesting that Walmart might, in fact, lead to reductions in social capital. A couple of friends and I decided that we were going to retest this. We'd take this to a different set of data and see what we could find out. Now, what was the genesis of this project? Well, it started with us trading emails about doing a study of this phenomenon that is social capital. I had a discussion of Walmart in one of my Econ 101 classes. I was teaching my first semester at Rhodes. I said, hey, here's where we can get some data on Walmart. Let's see what Walmart affects, because people are telling this story about how Walmart destroys communities. And that one paper turned into 4 papers, now 5 papers, probably almost 6 papers, and an entire research agenda came from talking to my students about issues like this. So, what we wanted to do is look at how Walmart affects different social capital building activities. Because there's nothing that we can define as social capital. You can't look at something and say, oh, well, that is social capital and that is not. But there are a lot of different things that we think of as being measures of social capital. Like, for example, do you play team sports? Do you build relationships that way? How often do you play cards? Do you play cards with your friends? How often do you go to club meetings? Do you do volunteer work? Do you give blood? I don't think we had that as one of our measures, but sometimes people will use blood donation or voting or things like that as measures of civic participation, measures of social capital, and measures of the strength of a community. So we looked at a bunch of different things at both the county level, and we also looked at individual responses to questions about how often do you have dinner parties, or how often do you play cards, how often do you participate in team sports, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and found that Walmart just doesn't really seem to affect any of this a whole lot, if at all. We did find a couple of relationships, but to be honest, we really didn't find that much. We came away from this by concluding that, yeah, really Walmart does not affect social capital, does not affect the kinds of relationships people have very much, to the extent that there is, in fact, something wrong with you crazy kids and your little blinky devices and your loud music and your hula hoops. It's not because of Walmart. Now, here's a caveat, and here's an example of some of the things that we did. Okay, so we looked at, these are county level estimates of the effect of Walmart, in this case, 10 years after there are 2 Walmarts in a place, using what's called a state fixed effects model. I won't bore you with the details on that. We looked, say, for example, at a measure of the number of voluntary associations per 10,000 or 100,000 people in a county, the voter turnout rate, the number of nonprofits divided by the population, census participation rate, and we found that basically in almost every case, and we did a bunch of other stuff too, the effect is practically 0. Now, the ones that are up there in blue are statistically significant, which if you take statistics or you take econometrics, you might learn what this means. This basically means that we cannot, using statistics, reject the hypothesis that these are not 0. So in other words, the number of associations per capita, okay, it's probably positive, it's probably not 0. There's a negative effect on voter turnout from expanding Walmart's presence in a place. And now this is where this becomes more of an art than a science. How do you interpret this? Okay, and if you watch the news, or if you read anything, if you see something that comes across your Facebook page where someone says, oh my gosh, here's a new study that shows that this will kill you. You know, not having your kid in a backward-facing car seat will kill everybody on the road, or something like that. You know, here's this research that shows this terrible stuff. Okay, how do you interpret that? How do you deal with that? Well, let's consider how we might interpret some of these results. Now, like I said, more or less across the board, Walmart doesn't really seem to matter, but we might see something like this, and this is, I just made this up. This didn't actually occur, but maybe you see something in the newspaper that says Walmart is destroying democracy. According to a study by researchers from Rhodes College, the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and Aggregate, Walmart's presence leads to significant reductions in voter participation. Basically, this means that statistically we can't reject the hypothesis that the effect, we can reject the hypothesis that the effect is zero. It is statistically significant. Whether it is quantitatively significant or economically significant, that's up for you to interpret. 0.7% in terms of voter participation, I don't really know whether that's a lot or a little, but then also when you change the model a little bit, the results change completely. So what's the takeaway from that? Be very, very careful about the information that you consume and interpret data, interpret statistics very, very skeptically. Because sometimes people may not necessarily be interpreting the data as carefully as they could be or should be, and that might lead them to erroneous conclusions. Now, what about Walmart, or more generally capitalism and individual values? Another complaint that people have about kids these years is that you're all immoral and dissolute, and for a wide variety of different reasons, people today are not like people used to be. And part of this is because of the expansion of the market economy, the expansion of capitalism, and perhaps even the expansion of Walmart. Now, some people from the left have argued that Walmart is what they call a conservative cultural gatekeeper, because there are some things that you cannot get at Walmart. If you read Maxim magazine, you can't get it at Walmart. If you read For Him magazine, you can't get it at Walmart. Nirvana had an album called In Utero some number of years ago. They had a song on the album called Rape Me. And the Walmart version of the album changed the title of the song to Waif Me. Okay, I have no idea what that means, but nonetheless, it apparently made it a little bit more palatable for Walmart shoppers. So Walmart was trying to foist its rural, bumpkinish, southern values on everybody else, and thereby control American culture and make us all more conservative. From the right, though, Walmart was pilloried because they sold certain medications that they didn't like. They joined the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, which obviously put Walmart in league with Satan, or something to that effect. So clearly, as a result of the fact that Walmart was joining the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, they were selling things that some people didn't approve of. They were very obviously trying to foist their slick, urban, big business values on rural America. So which is it? A lot of people say, well, capitalism changes people's values. Capitalism makes people either less conservative or more conservative, or for what in some sense it makes people worse than they would otherwise be. We can measure that by looking at access to Walmart, and again, using the data that Putnam assembled, we can try to figure out how exactly Walmart affects people's values. So what do we look at? Okay, so we looked at how Walmart affects your views of marijuana legalization. Do you think that marijuana should be legalized? Or do you think that marijuana should stay illegal? We say that you're probably more conservative if you think that marijuana should stay illegal, or you're becoming more progressive or more liberal if you have a more favorable view of marijuana legalization. How often do you go to church? How often do you go to bars? How often do you go to rock concerts? What are your views on same-sex marriage? How is Walmart affecting people's values? Once again, we find that the answer is almost certainly not at all. Again, there's more of an art than a science to this sometimes. Because if we include dummy variables, or if we include some measure of just the effect of the counties in which Walmart is entering, we get no effect whatsoever. If we don't include those effects, then it looks like Walmart really matters, but what's going on is that there's some characteristic of the counties in which Walmart is doing business that is explaining both the kinds of values people express and Walmart entry. So, how do we interpret this, or how do we do this scientifically rather than merely artistically? Okay? One of the variables that we looked at, and one of the variables that Robert Putnam collected data on, is how frequently do people rent porn? And we had 1 year of data for this measure of how frequently people rent porn, and we can include in the model state effects. So in other words, a measure of whether it's Alabama or Tennessee or Mississippi or New York or Massachusetts. When we don't include that, we get about a 5.5% reduction in the frequency with which people rent porn. And if we include those state effects, the effect actually gets a little bit bigger. And so it looks like we can go running forward and say, hey, Walmart is very clearly and very obviously reducing the frequency with which people rent pornography. But again, what we've got here is a case in which it's almost certain that since we only have 1 year of data and 1 year of relatively low quality data in terms of the number of individuals that are responding, well, okay, actually it's relatively high quality data, but we have a lot of individuals responding and a lot of cases where we have like 1 person per county. Okay, we get a reduction, we estimate this reduction in the frequency with which people rent porn, but once again, what's probably driving this is what's called omitted variable bias. There's something that's explaining both the presence of a Walmart and the frequency with which people are renting porn, and I am almost certain that this is what's called a spurious correlation. So this is almost certainly not a real effect, so don't get hoodwinked when someone tries to sell you too much on this. Yes?
What was the data set that you got for porn numbers?
Okay, so Robert Putnam, okay, that's actually a great question. I'm glad that you asked. So Robert Putnam in the year 2000 published a book called Bowling Alone. It was Bowling Alone, The Decline of American Community. And he put all of his data online. So from various government sources and from a handful of other different sources, he assembled all of his polling data on the frequency with which people do stuff. Like, do you go bowling? Do you play basketball? Do you play tennis or volleyball or something like that? How many times in the last 52 weeks have you rented porn? How many times in the last 52 weeks have you gone to church? How many times in the last 52 weeks have you gone to a rock concert, etc.? And all of these data are online. So again, if you have to do a project of some kind, bowlingalone.com has all of the data that we use for some of these studies. What about leisure and culture? What about the ways that people allocate their time and their energy? Is capitalism, as measured by, say, Walmart or something like that, making us worse off on net? Is it making us more likely to go see Rainier Wolfcastle in the latest really stupid McBain movie? Or are we going to see Troy McClure in the legitimate theater in Stop the Planet of the Apes, I Walk It Off? Okay. So we look at how exactly Walmart affects the way that people allocate their leisure activities. We split this into a couple of different categories. First, things that are going to be directly affected by access to Walmart. So stuff where you can get the equipment at Walmart, things where you can't get the equipment at Walmart, and then finally, a couple of high culture things. Specifically, we look at visits to art galleries, attendance at lectures, and attendance at classical music concerts. So we find that for stuff you can get at Walmart, like buying books, buying movies, watching TV, playing tennis and golf, yeah, there's a positive effect. You do more of this as Walmart comes in. There's no real change necessarily, maybe a slight negative change, I think, in the frequency with which you do stuff for which you can't get the equipment at Walmart. And there's either no change or a slight positive change in the frequency with which you do high culture stuff. So classical music concerts, visits to art galleries. We interpret this as very indirect evidence that Walmart is increasing people's opportunities and increasing people's real incomes. Our most recent study, our paper that was published in March, asks whether Super Walmart is increasing obesity. And the logic on this should be fairly straightforward. We've talked about how Walmart and how Super Walmart reduce prices of food, so cheaper food means people eat more, they move down the demand curve for food, for those of you who are taking an economics class right now, and they eat more. As a result of the fact that they eat more, they get heavier. And it turns out that's kind of what we find. We find that if you look at transient obesity since the late 1980s, so roughly from the start of Super Walmart until the middle of the 2000s or so, the percentage of the increase in obesity explained by the diffusion of Super Walmart is about 10.5%. So about 1/10 of the increase in obesity over the last 20 years or so, we can trace directly to the expansion of Super Walmart. And we're pretty sure that the mechanism by which that's taking place is through food prices. Super Walmart comes in, you get cheaper food at Super Walmart, you get cheaper food at the places competing with Super Walmart, you buy more food, you eat more food, you get heavier. So clearly then, A lot of people might think that, well, what this means is that we need to oppose Walmart because we'll all get fatter if Walmart comes in. But, what we want to do is compare the cost to the benefits. Yes, there might be this slight expansion in people's waistlines. So you might get a little bit, heavier around the middle, but you're also going to get a little bit heavier in the wallet. Okay, because again, Super Walmart in the year 2002 saved the average household about $177 through its direct effect on prices and then also through its spillover effect on competitors' prices. If you're a little bit heavier, you're going to spend more money on healthcare. We estimate, though, that the savings, the amount of this $177 per household savings that was offset by higher obesity was about only 5.6%. So if you say, hey, we need to stop Super Walmart because they're going to increase obesity, you're literally cutting, well, not literally, but it's like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. You're saying, well, we need to avoid these costs of obesity, but to avoid those costs of additional obesity, you're imposing massive costs on people who would otherwise have access to lower prices. So there's a very good case to be made for Walmart, for Costco, for Target, etc., as examples of good things in the American economy. There are also cases to be made against them. Okay. Let's see, let's skip these. Whoops. So, okay. Here we go. Okay. Walmart is very politically active. And it became very politically active several years ago when, I think this was when Congress really started to kind of threaten free trade. A lot of the companies that are criticizing Walmart, that are criticizing companies like Walmart, are saying, well, they're expanding by use of eminent domain, or they're expanding by getting subsidies, or the government is paying for their job training, or the government is paying welfare to people who work at Walmart. And this is a gigantic list of ways in which Walmart is politically active, and ways in which Walmart is using force to actually make itself richer, using force to actually increase its bottom line, rather than trade. And indeed, these are very legitimate, very, very valid criticisms of Walmart, because Walmart is participating very actively in what we call a rent-seeking society. So, the Wall Street Journal, a couple of years ago, a little over a year ago, pointed out that there's actually an entire company whose job is basically to go in and start campaigns against Walmart that are primarily going to be funded by companies that compete with Walmart. So Kroger, for example, might hire this company to come in and raise a ruckus about a proposed Walmart opening and try to fight them that way. This represents on net social waste. This is not an increase in wealth. Rather, people are using scarce resources. People are using scarce resources in order to redistribute wealth rather than to create new wealth. Now, it's interesting that I'm speaking at Middle Tennessee State because those of you who are studying economics have something in common with an economist by the name of James Buchanan, who is a graduate of Middle Tennessee State, won the Nobel Prize in 1986 for his work on the economics of politics, and has set a legacy for you guys to follow on exactly these kinds of questions, exactly these kinds of issues. Walmart is responding. Costco is responding. Target is responding. Lots and lots and lots of companies are responding to the political incentives that are in place. And indeed, I would argue, and I would be the first to agree, that those incentives might be encouraging them to do things that on net waste resources. The problem there is not with the people who are responding to the incentives, but with the incentives themselves. So, if you want to make the world a better place, look for ways in which, and look for places in which the incentives are distorted. Look for places and look for ways in which the incentives are causing people to do antisocial things and try to find ways to change those incentives. A final point. A lot of people worry about Walmart. They say, well, Walmart is going to take over the world someday. Someday they're going to be the only company, or they're going to be the only corporation. And someday you'll only be able to shop at Walmart. You'll only be able to work at Walmart. This isn't going to happen for a couple of different reasons. First, as a firm gets bigger, they start to face the same kinds of problems with what's called economic calculation that socialist societies start to face. An economist named Murray Rothbard pointed out that basically there's no way that a single company can ever run the world because they would basically be a gigantic socialist economy and would fail miserably. Second, Walmart is making a lot of money. This means, though, that a lot of people are looking for ways to compete with Walmart so that they can make that money. An economist by the name of Donald Boudreaux has a hypothesis, and one that I think is valid, is that someday when Walmart goes out of business, not if, but when Walmart goes out of business, people will lament the fact that Walmart has gone out of business. The same sort of people who today are criticizing Walmart and saying, "Oh, we've lost all the mom and pop shops, we've lost all the stores, we've lost something authentic about America," will, when Walmart goes out of business, say, "What can we say about the American economy that even Walmart has gone out of business? Even this venerable institution. Oh, I remember when I was little, you could get anything at Walmart. You'd run into your neighbors at Walmart. You could buy anything you wanted at Walmart. You could get dinner at Walmart. You could get clothes at Walmart. You get all sorts of crazy combinations of stuff at Walmart, and now Walmart has gone by the wayside." And indeed, I think that someday Walmart will go by the wayside. But the thing that will make Walmart go by the wayside is making sure that we have the incentives right. Making sure not that Walmart can prevent competition using the political system, or that someone can shut Walmart down using the political system, but that someone who comes along, who builds the proverbial better mousetrap and beats Walmart at their own game, can reap the rewards from doing so. So with that, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions. Ooh, I've got a question. But aren't you better off if you know the people, if you know mom and pop who are taking care of you? If you go in and you have some sort of bond with the people who are selling you the stuff? Maybe so. That's entirely possible. Indeed, my dad hated shopping, or my dad, I think, still doesn't like shopping at Walmart because he just doesn't like the big store. He kind of liked knowing the people that he was buying stuff from and things like that. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Well, I'll give you two examples of the difference between the Walmart economy and the kind of economy that some people are holding up as ideal. I do a fair amount of public speaking, and sometimes I go around talking about Walmart. And in November of 2009, I went to Wake Forest University in North Carolina to talk about Walmart. And I get to Wake Forest Winston-Salem, to Wake Forest University. I get there, and I unpack, and I realize I've got a dark blue suit, but I don't have any dress shoes. I have my brown beat-up sneakers. I don't have any dress shoes. And because I don't see any problem with this. I mean, I'm something of a fashion illiterate, but I realized that there are members of my family who would be aghast if I were to do something like this, wearing brown sneakers and a suit. So I thought, okay, great. I have got to get a pair of shoes. It's like, 7 o'clock in the morning in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I've got to get a pair of shoes. There wasn't like a mom and pop shoe store that was open, or if there were any mom and pop shoe stores, they were certainly not going to be open at 7 o'clock in the morning. Who was there for me? Walmart and Target. And indeed, the very shoes that I'm wearing right now, these beautiful black shoes, I bought at Target. Didn't buy it at Walmart. I didn't buy them at Walmart because Target has a reputation for slightly higher quality. But nonetheless, it was a big box store that came to my rescue when I, the absent-minded economist, left for a trip with a suit and a pair of beat-up brown sneakers, and saved me from the humiliation and the shame that I would have felt had I gotten on stage wearing my beat-up brown sneakers and a suit. Second time, last year in February. First time I'd ever been to Iowa. I went to Storm Lake, Iowa, to Buena Vista University, and I had to get up really early to drive to Omaha. So I think it was like 4 o'clock in the morning. I get up and I'm not feeling particularly good, and when I got back to Memphis, I was knocked out for a couple of weeks, picked up something. But it's about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I really want some Dayquil or some kind of cold medicine. Who's open at 4 o'clock in the morning in Storm Lake, Iowa? It wasn't Mom and Pop's drugstore. It wasn't even Walgreens. There was, fortunately, a super Walmart where I could get a Coke and I could get a pack of Dayquil. So once again, these are relatively minor considerations, but these are two very concrete examples of situations in which big box retailers have ridden to my rescue when I myself have either made mistakes or found myself wanting. So, with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have. Yes?
I heard someone saying once, and I don't know if he was an economist or what, but something about how Walmart's like
Okay, so the question is about Walmart's impact on pharmaceuticals and Walmart's impact on the quality of healthcare. So Walmart's $4 prescription drug plan that came out a couple of years ago, I think is very, very interesting. I've not studied it, and I don't know that anybody has. But it is interesting that right after Walmart started a $4 generic prescription program, almost everybody else followed suit. So I take for granted that I can go to my local Kroger and for $4 get generic prescription drugs. No one has studied that yet. Somebody will eventually. I don't know if it'll be me. I don't know if it'll be me or one of my co-authors or someone. But my guess is that ultimately, over the long run, healthcare is going to be cheaper. Healthcare is going to be more affordable as a result of the effect of big box retailers. Other questions? Yes.
I was just going to say, with your earlier comments, it's not just sort of that Walmart has sort of magical power,
Right.
But the structure of these big box retailers is what you provide the economy with potential benefits to the economy scale.
Yeah. Okay. That's a very good point. Okay, because a lot of people, when people read history or when people write history, they want to talk about great people. So great men specifically. It's like Thomas Jefferson was sitting and sort of thinking about his place in history as he wrote the Declaration of Independence or something like that. And he'd sit there and it was like the History Channel or something to that effect. People want to tell the same story about business, that everybody was poor and then the railroads came along. Well, okay, that's not really it. Or Henry Ford revolutionized everything. Or people, if you've seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The scene where George Clooney goes in and he needs to get a car part, and he wants some Dapper Dan. And he says, well, ain't this a geographical oddity? 2 weeks from everywhere. The world was like that, and then Sam Walton came along, and Walmart sprang fully formed from the mind of Sam Walton. That's absolutely not true. The things that made Walmart possible were, first of all, a legacy of innovation by a lot of other retailers. I'll spare you the details on that. And then also, bless you, and I think one thing to think about, like if you want to be critical of the structure of incentives that have produced Walmart, is there's a case to be made that they rest on a very heavily subsidized business model. My guess is that Walmart would not be Walmart were it not for something like the interstate highway system, which was built with government money. Now that at this point remains speculation. I think it needs to be studied in greater detail. But you make a very good point. There's nothing specific. There's nothing that's specifically great about Walmart as such. It's that people came up with a number of different innovations. Sam Walton took things other people were doing, made them better, and then turned them into the largest retailer in the world. Other questions? Yes.
Just kind of a small comment.
Sure.
At the end, you talked about how eventually someone's going to come along and
Mhm.
solve that.
Yep.
If you look at it, you mentioned companies at the very beginning.
Mhm.
That Walmart kind of is the better mousetrap.
Yep.
If you look at Sears, at one point Sears kind of was Walmart,
Mhm.
and recently you've seen Sears kind of trail off.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, Walmart is already the better mousetrap.
Right.
Certainly, makes it better.
Okay. Yeah. That's a very good point. So it's a comment about who is the better mousetrap from time to time. And chain stores became the better mousetrap for the better part of the 20th century. Walmart is currently the better mousetrap. People have asked me to speculate as to who's going to beat Walmart. Okay, if I knew with certainty, I would be the richest person on earth because I would put all of my money in stock in that company because I know they're going to beat Walmart. Again, I don't know who it's going to be necessarily. I can tell you though that last year we canceled our Sam's Club membership because of access to Amazon Prime. And with two small children, right now we have a 3-year-old and a 17-month-old, just having diapers just show up on the front porch in a gigantic box is great. Having a month's worth of cereal show up in a box on the front porch is wonderful. Don't have to put anybody in the car. You don't have to drive anywhere. It's just, if any of you have children, you know what I'm talking about. If any of you will have children, you will know what I'm talking about. Other questions or comments? Mike?
Did you ever look at the effects of Walmart on crime?
Did we ever look at the effects of Walmart on crime? This is actually an idea that Professor Hammack and I talked about several years ago, and the answer is no, we have not looked at the effect of Walmart on crime. I actually have the data set on my laptop right now, though, and let's see. My bus doesn't leave until 10, so we can work. Yeah, so we can work on that if you want. Yes.
You notice a direct correlation, you talked about politics,
Mhm.
between WIC policy and Walmart policy, especially when addressing food prices in the board.
Oh, sorry, did you say WIC policy?
Right.
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Okay, so this question about whether there's a direct correlation between WIC policy, so women, infants, and children, or used to be temporary aid and needy families, I think. There's basically food stamps of some kind, some sort of transfer payments, and Walmart policy, Walmart politics. Honestly, I have no idea. Now, I will say this: as I understand it, a lot of food stamps and transfers like this are basically ways of giving money, and this is, as I understand it, ways of giving money to agricultural special interests by using relatively poor people as kind of intermediaries. So you give food stamps to poor people. You give them this list of things that are approved that they can buy that just so happen to be produced by massive special interests, and the special interests get the money ultimately. Now, in shopping at my local Kroger, I remember noticing a sign that said, like, I think it was like WIC licensed and approved vendor or something like that. I don't know how you become a licensed WIC vendor or how you become a licensed WIC seller. That, again, I think, especially for those of you kind of interested in the intersection between economics and politics, finding out how you do that. Huh? Okay, yeah, oh yeah. I'm sure it's a big process to be someone who can collect EBT or who, okay. Okay. So that raises an interesting point, and I'm just gonna speculate for just a second. So I think this would be a great project, but that might be one of the reasons why smaller retailers, specifically smaller food retailers, might have trouble competing with firms like Walmart, because if it is such a time-intensive process to become an authorized vendor or to become authorized to accept food stamps or something like that, then that would immediately give a natural advantage to big firms like Walmart. Again, I don't know what the full story is there, but one thing I hope you take from this is there's an awful lot that we know about the world, but there's even more that we don't know. And I hope that some of you guys go out and fill in some of those blanks. Other questions?
One more thing.
Sure.
Next with the last one.
Mhm.
You looked at labor policy as far as the wage policy compared to welfare, the employees who are on welfare for Walmart as well.
Oh, okay. Yes. So there's some questions. A lot of people were raising questions about use of welfare programs by people who work for Walmart, and also people are raising questions about Walmart's wage policies, Walmart's benefit policies, and things like that. Now, one thing I found very instructive was a couple of years ago, there was an edited volume of essays critical of Walmart, and one of them said, it made this giant list of claims about how terrible Walmart is, and then it basically said, we don't know enough about the structure of the Walmart workforce to know whether people are happy or how many of them are on welfare or how many of them get this wage or that wage or the other thing. And a lot of these things are prerequisites for the sorts of strong claims that people want to make when they're criticizing Walmart. So one claim that some critics have made is that Walmart is subsidized by welfare or subsidized by state health insurance programs. One could just as easily turn that around and say, well, Walmart is in fact alleviating part of the burden on these state healthcare programs, on welfare and things like that, by providing positive wages. So that I would say is another one of those areas where we know a little bit, but we are far from knowing the full story.
I was hoping that somebody would bring this up. A student raised this in class one day when, isn't it terrible that Walmart buys a lot of stuff from China and sells it here?
Okay. Isn't it terrible that Walmart buys a lot of stuff from China and sells it here? Well, the answer is no. Okay? Because Walmart buys a lot of stuff from China and they sell it here. We get stuff. The Chinese get American currency, which they can sit on if they want. I mean, it's green pieces of paper. It's not really something you can do much that's that entertaining with. Or they use it to buy stuff that's made in America, to buy American-made goods and services. or unfortunately, in recent years, American government debt. But that's another subject for that's definitely another subject for another day. Okay, probably take one more question. Yes.
You mentioned that Walmart had an effect on low poverty
Mm-hmm.
in the U.S., but have you been able to study how it works like international environments
Okay.
that don't have capitalism?
Okay. Fantastic question. Okay, so Walmart and poverty rates. So there's an argument that when Walmart opens shop, the county level poverty rate might actually increase. So in the U.S. Walmart might be associated with slightly higher poverty rates. Internationally, and again, this is another one of those things where we have some ideas, but we don't know with certainty. I think John Tierney, is a columnist for the New York Times, made, I think, a very compelling argument for giving Walmart the Nobel Peace Prize, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but a compelling argument for giving Walmart the Nobel Peace Prize because of the way that they have lifted the standards of living of so many people around the world. Okay, now again, this becomes something else that I think is Walmart gets criticized for buying goods made in countries that have lax labor standards or that are extremely poor or what have you. And I think this is something, again, that is really, really, really worth studying. Why? Because Walmart buys stuff that's made internationally. If they're buying stuff that's made with slave labor, like literal slave labor, that's obviously terrible. Okay. But at the same time, if legal systems are going to function reasonably well, Walmart should be exposing themselves to liability by doing things like that. And they have an internal reporting system to report like legit human rights violations in some of the places from which they source their goods. I honestly don't know how that's working right now. It's something else I think that ultimately deserves study. But I think on net, the Walmart effect internationally is positive, and indeed positive for some of the poorest people in the world.